U.S. President Donald Trump has tapped Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs Robert O'Brien as his new national security advisor. The realignment of Trump's national security team comes while speculation runs high that working-level talks between North Korea and the U.S. will resume soon. Today, we go in-depth on what the latest appointment could mean for Washington's foreign and security policies and how they might impact affairs on the Korean Peninsula. For that, Dr. Jung-yeop from the Sejong Institute joins me in the studio today. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So Robert O'Brien becomes Trump's fourth national security advisor, and he was a career lawyer before taking his job at the government. Now, he's not much of a big name, at least in the public sphere, but he's expected to cause less friction than his predecessor. What was your take of the appointment?
So the main reason that President Trump replaced Mr. John Bolton with Mr. Robert O'Brien was that simply he doesn't like what John Bolton recommended to him as a policy advisors. So I think that Mr. O'Brien knows the situation, what brought him to that position. That means that the reason why he was picked was he might be more loyal to the president, and he is not really raised a flag against President Trump. So I think that compared to the Mr. Bolton, then Mr. O'Brien is not going to make a scene within the White House as before, like Mr. John Bolton.
So O'Brien places John Bolton, who's been known for his hawkish views. So some say O'Brien may be as hawkish, but he doesn't have any North Korea-related experience on his resume. Given that factor, do you see changes to Washington's policy towards North Korea, or it being pretty much the same as it is now?
So compared to other candidates who were mentioned by the President Trump as a potential candidates, Mr. O'Brien's experience in foreign affairs are fairly limited, and I don't know him very well, even though I have been working with many friends in D.C., but not many people actually know him before he was nominated. So many people in Washington started to buy his book, While America Slept. So, and very interestingly, his book was endorsed by Mr. John Bolton. And the content of his book is in the similar line with what Mr. Bolton has argued so far, like more stronger position toward Iran and China. And in that book, he never mentioned about North Korea. So I think that his position is not much different from what Mr. John Bolton has been trying to persuade Mr. Trump, but the way how he works with President Trump might be different. So I think that even though Mr. O'Brien has a similar line of policies before, but the way he works with President Trump will be totally different. So maybe he's not going to oppose what President Trump is going to lead his country.
So meanwhile, North Korea has welcomed Trump's political determination to approach North Korea-U.S. relations in a more practical manner after he suggested a new method to resolving the deadlock in the nuclear talks, which North Korea had been calling for. And it also praised Washington's departure from the Libyan model by removing John Bolton from the team. Do you see a bit of optimism in the upcoming working-level talks between the two?
So I think we have to see more clearly about what President mentioned about so-called Libyan model and Mr. John Bolton's mentioning of Libyan model. Mr. Bolton mentioned the Libyan model earlier last year. By that, North Korea said a negative statement. So the negotiation between two leaders were about to be cancelled. So it was last year before Singapore summit, and after that, Mr. Bolton was not heavily involved in the negotiation between United States and North Korea, even though he was in the scene at Hanoi, but he was not the only reason why the Hanoi summit did not produce any outcomes. So I think that the Libyan model is not really the problem, even though he indeed mentioned that before. So President Trump today mentioned that we are not going to use the Libyan model, which was obvious. And he said that maybe a new method would be a good way to do. So I don't know whether when he mentioned a new method, he mentioned something different from Libyan model. I think the Hanoi summit is already different from Libyan model. So I think if President Trump mentioned that he's seeking a new method different from Hanoi, then we might think of something more flexible from the U.S. side. But when he used the reference point as a Libyan model, then it's unclear what a new method he really want to mean this context.
So we'll have to see what those are. Now, those remarks were actually made by Kim Myung-gil, who is known as Pyongyang's new special envoy for the working level talks with Washington, with Stephen Biegun being his U.S. counterpart. Do you think this will be another variable in the upcoming talks?
So I think at least now, officially, North Korea is ready to put someone in the negotiating table. So after Panmunjom meeting between President Trump, Chairman Kim, and our President Moon, that there was a speculation that Ambassador Kim Myung-gil would be leading the North Korean negotiating team, but it has not been confirmed officially yet. But today's statement includes the term that Ambassador Kim Myung-gil is going to lead North Korean negotiating team. So I think North Korea is ready to put someone in the table officially. But the problem now is that now Stephen Biegun is a candidate to be like vice minister, a vice secretary for the U.S. State Department. That means that Stephen Biegun's level is way higher than Ambassador Kim Myung-gil. So I'm not sure, since North Korea nominated Ambassador Kim Myung-gil as a chief negotiator, whether U.S. is going to keep Stephen Biegun as a chief negotiator, or U.S. is going to put someone else in the special representative for the North Korea policy if Stephen Biegun is indeed nominated for the deputy secretary.
So staying with that, there is speculation that Stephen Biegun may be tapped as the Deputy Secretary of State. If that's the case, what would this mean for denuclearization talks as well as Seoul-Washington alliance? So
there was a case in the past that Bill Burns, who has the two jobs at the same time. He was representative for the Iranian policy, but at the same time, he was the deputy secretary for the State Department. So I think there was a precedent in this, similar to this case, that it is not really weird if Mr. Biegun is nominated for the Deputy Secretary of the State and at the same time special representative for the North Korea policy. But if Mr. Biegun has to be involved in intense negotiating, which takes a lot of time, which consumes a lot of time of his work, and the Deputy Secretary of the State has to manage so many other things other than North Korea. So I'm not sure if the working level negotiations become very intense. I'm not sure whether how Mr. Biegun is going to manage his time.
Staying with the U.S. team, now with the appointment of O'Brien as the new Secretary Advisor as well, it will solidify the status of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo as the most influential foreign voice within the Trump administration. Do you see Pompeo having an increased role in North Korea affairs going forward?
So not only because that Mr. Bolton was replaced by Mr. O'Brien, but also because the North Korean policy has been belonging to the Mr. Pompeo since like summer last year. So even though NS's advisor has been very influential in making U.S. foreign policy, but under the Trump administration, Mr. Bolton's role in North Korean policy has been pretty much limited. So I think that by replacing Mr. Bolton with Mr. O'Brien would make Mr. Pompeo's role more in the future. However, Mr. Pompeo has been occupying the role for the North Korean policy already. So I think there would be not much difference from the U.S. government position on North Korea.
So while speculation mounts that working levels will resume sometime possibly later this month, Seoul's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon is also in the U.S. to meet with Stephen Biegun, his U.S. counterpart. Now, Lee said that the North has recently shifted its emphasis from sanctions relief to security guarantees for the regime, and that the two sides will be discussing how they could address this matter. Given Lee's remarks, do you think there's going to be a shift in the working level talks from sanctions to security regime coming forward?
So one of the things that we have to make it very clear is that whenever North Korea brings the issue of the security guarantee, that there was no real progress in negotiation. Because when North Korea brings the issue of the security guarantee, they didn't really talk about what that means. So the security guarantee is abstract terms, but to achieve the security guarantee, you have to do something concrete, like something concrete policy is required. But North Korea has never really clarified what they want from the United States and the international community. So let's say that in 2005, September 19, joint statement that there was a clause that U.S. is not going to attack North Korea with nuclear weapons or conventional weapons. But it didn't make North Korea feel safe because it doesn't give security guarantee that North Korea wants. Then North Korea has to clarify what they want in terms of security guarantee by saying that this is the kind of things, kind of policies that we want from the U.S. and the international community. So I think that if North Korea keeps arguing that security guarantee is the foremost thing that they need in negotiating with the United States, there's a higher chance that the talks between U.S. and North Korea would be prolonged.
So we'll have to see what they bring to the table. Now, shifting gears slightly, yesterday marked the one-year anniversary of the Indo-Korean summit in Pyongyang, and North Korea has not made any response in regards to it, nor is it trying to engage with Seoul. Do you think the regime is intentionally leaving South Korea out ahead of its talks with the U.S.?
So it's very unfortunate that North Korea did not join the ceremony yesterday. The September 19 last year, there was higher hope that the inter-Korean relations would be improved over the years. However, with very little progress made in the area of denuclearization, which means that North Korea did not get any relief on the sanctions, North Korea has not moved any inch in the inter-Korean relations, including family reunion and other projects with South Korea. So I think that from North Korea's point of view, that North Korea wanted basically two things from South Korea. One is that South Korean government should influence U.S. government in terms of with regard to the negotiating with North Korea. And second, they expect South Korea to provide some kind of economic and financial benefits to North Korea. But over the years since last September, that those two things were not delivered by South Korean government. That is why North Korea was disappointed by South Korean government, and that is why they showed their angers through these kind of things.
So next week, actually, South Korean President Moon Jae-in will take to the podium on the global diplomatic stage, and along with speaking at the UN General Assembly, he's also scheduled to sit down with U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, given the current situation on the Korean Peninsula, what role do you see for the South Korean president at this moment in time?
So even though the President Trump mentioned a new method, and North Korean Ambassador Kim Myung-gil mentioned that he welcomed that the President Trump's mentioning new method, but so far we don't know what exactly that is. That means that it's very difficult for two countries to find the middle ground. So our government role is to talk to both sides and helping them to find the middle ground sooner, so we can keep the negotiation on the track to result in the fruitful result.
So hopefully we'll see some positive outcome next week. Thank you for your insights today.
Thank you.